Breaking news, make your own water. That's the blunt message Canada delivered to the United States. And those 4 words hit Washington like a thunderclap. Because this wasn't mere rhetoric. It carried real weight, a clear signal that North America's freshwater isn't some bargaining chip to haggle over. It's a vital strategic artery, and someone had just reached for it. At the heart of the uproar stood Donald Trump. The man issuing the sobering reply was Mark Carney. Once a central bank governor, now a globally respected figure, he positioned himself squarely between the American president and the water system sustaining tens of millions. One telephone conversation, one firm reminder, and the entire storyline flipped. What Trump regarded as simple infrastructure, Carney recognized as genuine authority. And behind that authority lay geography, legal obligations, and generations of agreements, all poised like a loaded mechanism, waiting to spring. The episode didn't start inside the Oval Office or at some high-level conference table. It began along an unseen boundary slicing straight through the middle of the continent. Canada possesses over 2 million lakes, controls 18% of global fresh surface water, and holds a silent upper hand that no American president had seriously confronted until Trump. He eyed Canada's fresh water the way someone eyes an unguarded prize. The Great Lakes, the Columbia River, the St. Lawrence, roughly 1/5 of the planet's accessible drinking supply right there in view. Yet Trump didn't treat it as something to safeguard or equitably manage. He treated it as bargaining power, as a valve to twist. There's a very large faucet in Canada, he declared, as though opening it could instantly end California's dry spells. Engineers chuckled. Hydrologists rolled their eyes. No such valve existed. No pipeline on Earth could move that volume. Pure physical reality ruled it out. Still, inside Washington circles, the fantasy of control ran unchecked. Then came Mark Carney. To most Americans, he was simply the former head of the Bank of Canada, someone skilled at threading the needle between finance, international law, and quiet diplomacy. He understood that water is never just H2O. He knew the agreements covering the Great Lakes, the 1909 Boundary Waters Treaty, the 2008 Great Lakes Compact were not optional guidelines. They were binding commitments forged through long, hard years of discussion, built specifically to block the very kind of one-sided pressure Trump appeared to view as normal. With steady composure masking the force he was about to apply, Carney placed the call. A single conversation that reverberated through every powerful hallway. A conversation 4 separate sources confirmed was being closely observed as history unfolded live. The point was straightforward. The delivery unmistakable. Canada holds the controls. The United States does not. You cannot redirect what naturally runs downward without agreement, without legal grounding, without mutual consent. Trump didn't accept it gracefully. He reacted with astonishment. How could a nation with barely 1/10 the population wield such influence over him? Water, he assumed, could be bartered, swapped, forced, but Carney had devoted decades to establishing that water isn't money. It's leverage. And when that leverage sits higher up the watershed, it becomes total. The Columbia River drives American hydropower stations, supports farms worth billions, sustains major industrial zones across Oregon and Washington. Every drop originates in Canada. Carney's call wasn't merely polite notice. It was a pointed reminder that upstream authority isn't negotiable. It's written into nature. It's written into law. It's the foundation of organized society. The moment carried extra force because wildfires were scorching California, drought was tightening its grip across the Southwest, and Trump, on camera, kept promising fixes that lived only in his mind. He gestured northward toward a non-existent spigot, vowing more water than the region could possibly absorb. Journalists smirked. Engineers ran the numbers. Hydrologists winced. Yet Carney grasped something deeper. He understood that no threat, no presidential directive, no trade penalty in history could override one basic, unchanging fact. Water runs downhill, and Canada, with its vast lakes, rivers, and ironclad legal structure, sits higher up. What happened next wasn't disorder. It was a textbook display of understated strength. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford had already illustrated the concept using electricity. When he slapped surcharge fees on exports, American households in several states saw bills jump overnight. Roughly 1.5 million people directly felt the impact of power originating north of the border. Water stood ready to deliver the same message. Carney required no press conference, no fiery statement. A single, precisely timed phone call, supported by treaties, reinforced by topography, anchored in law, was sufficient to make the president hesitate. And hesitation of that kind was brand new territory for Trump. He was used to reshaping people, markets, even entire governments according to his wishes. But this time the opponent refused to bend. Water doesn't bargain. Lakes don't schedule discussions. Rivers ignore ringing phones. Still, Trump pushed. The White House quietly examined possibilities, consulted technical experts, studied diversion concepts. Carney's intervention had already doused every proposal. Every major diversion idea floated over the past 60 years. The 1960s Nawapa scheme, the James Bay megaproject, even California's 1990s efforts had crumbled. Now, Trump was chasing the same unattainable goal, but this time a seasoned figure armed with calm certainty and deep international experience had already marked the boundary. Canada occupies the higher ground, and the higher ground does not compromise. That initial clash amounted to far more than a conversation. It marked history being shaped in the present tense. Trump's inner circle, conditioned to expect quick surrender, encountered the stubborn resistance of natural law and binding international agreements that refused to yield to impulse or decree. Carney's words were measured yet immovable. The Great Lakes, the Columbia, the St. Lawrence belong under Canadian stewardship. Your systems lie downstream. Your pressure carries no force. Gravity cannot be intimidated. You cannot purchase what gravity delivers. For a president who defined strength through leverage, deal-making, and public perception, this became a rare exercise in modesty, one the United States seldom experiences. The Columbia River, an unseen cornerstone of American life, begins high in British Columbia's mountains, flows south through Washington and Oregon, generates electricity at 31 U.S. dams, waters crops worth billions, and moves massive freight volumes annually. Every single drop starts in Canada. Trump regarded that river as another item open to renegotiation, another pressure point to exploit. Carney understood the opposite. Upstream position equals complete dominance. That water doesn't merely supply agriculture or municipalities. It underpins the economic survival of whole regions. For someone who built influence on leverage, overlooking that truth spelled disaster. Trump's advisors sketched scenarios. Pipelines, rerouting channels, diplomatic arm twisting. Technical teams mapped hypothetical routes. Officials prepared position papers. Consultants crafted messaging. Every plan smashed against one immovable reality. The Columbia's headwaters lie in Canada, and Canada holds the valve. With quiet confidence, Carney impressed upon Washington that river governance isn't elective. Unlike tariffs, steel quotas, or oil contracts, waterways answer to treaties, binational compacts, and the hard facts of terrain. The Columbia River Treaty, product of decades of painstaking diplomacy, was crafted to harmonize flood management, power generation, and ecological health between two countries. Trump suspended it. Then he terminated it completely. 6 years of effort, 19 formal rounds, more than 50 public consultations, all erased in a stroke. Meanwhile, the Great Lakes, 5 enormous freshwater seas containing 1/5 of the world's surface, freshwater, represented far more than scenery. They embodied a legal and strategic framework Washington could no longer pretend away. The 1909 Boundary Waters Treaty had endured 2 world wars, the Cold War, and every presidency since Taft. The 2008 Great Lakes Compact had won bipartisan, multi-state commitment to a bedrock rule. Water remains inside the basin. Trump, seemingly unaware of that accumulated precedent, casually described those agreements as disposable during calls that left diplomats stunned on both sides. Carney's response clarified the truth. Treaties are not optional, and physical geography never bargains. The consequences landed quickly and concretely. California, scorched by prolonged drought and desperate for relief, sought water. Trump sought a victory he could brandish. Carney rendered the math inescapable. Canada's lakes and rivers exist for shared benefit, not unilateral extraction. They represent leverage. The Columbia alone generates 40% of Pacific Northwest hydropower, waters $8 billion in agriculture, and sustains vital shipping lanes. Redirecting it would demand defying topography, violating treaties, and harming millions living downstream. The arithmetic stayed brutally simple, yet the takeaway cut deep. Upstream authority is final authority. That principle had already been proven in another sector. Ontario, led by Doug Ford, applied a 25% surcharge on electricity sales to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. Overnight, 1.5 million American customers faced steeper rates. Ford didn't debate endlessly. He acted. Carney signaled that water could operate on identical logic. One carefully placed call, one unambiguous warning, and Trump confronted a situation entirely foreign to his experience. A neighboring country armed with both legal right and geographic advantage, a country capable, if provoked, of influencing the lifeblood of American cities and industries without a single military move, without new duties, without any public spectacle. The brilliance of Carney's method lay in its restraint. He avoided drama, he skipped social media battles, he relied on position, and he possessed it in abundance. The Columbia, the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence, and Canada's innumerable lakes and reservoirs were not theoretical concepts. They constituted power beyond Washington's usual calculations. Trump, long practiced at reshaping economies, leaders, and alliances, suddenly met an unchangeable limit. Certain forces, certain natural systems, refused to be coerced. The rule was straightforward, but its ramifications enormous. Roughly 20% of the planet's accessible surface freshwater is managed upstream by Canada. The United States, regardless of who occupies the presidency, remains downstream. Even Trump loyalists who trusted his instincts felt the jolt. This wasn't bargaining. This wasn't commerce. This was physics, topography, treaty obligations, and the careful long-term strategy of a man, Mark Carney, who grasped leverage more clearly than anyone inside the Beltway. In that exchange, the president absorbed a truth no directive, no post, no sanction could erase. Canada occupies the high ground. Carney voiced the unvarnished facts. And the large faucet Trump referenced so lightly was, in reality, the single most decisive strategic advantage on the continent.